You can tell her, you can tell her anything. She's a real good listener. You can tell her anything.
Hi, this is Teresa. You're listening to You Can Tell Me Anything. This is the podcast where comedians tell me something they want to get off their chest. And today I have a very special guest. She's the creator of the show Dummy on Quibby, and she also wrote on Wilfred, co-created Deadbeat, and was a co-EP on Kidding, which I'm an Ariana Grande fan, so that's, really why I watched that. Give it up for Cody Heller.
Hey guys.
How's it going? First of all, I do want to, I want to ask for the good confession. But before that, just because I already gave away my love of Ariana, did you get to meet her? Did you get to work with her?
I worked on Kidding season 1, and then I was working on Kidding season 2 when Dummy got greenlit to go into production. So I left before production of season 2. So I did not get to meet Ariana Grande, but I've heard lovely things. I'm close with all the Kidding people, and I've heard lovely things about her. But that was a very fun show to work on, especially because Michelle Gondry directed most of the episodes, and obviously Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind as a film, school kid back in the day. That was my. The movie that I looked at is the ultimate what I want to create someday. So I got to work really closely with him, which was awesome. Jim Carrey. It was a great fun show. But no, I did not get to meet Ariana. I'm sorry. Is it Ariana? Is it Ariana or
I guess
Ariana?
It's Ariana. They call her Ari heads. Now I'm am I a real fan? I say Ariana, but I think you might be right. It might be Ariana.
I don't know. But she seems lovely. She seems incredible.
Well, your excuse is good because you ended up going to make your own show, which is even cooler. But before we get into that, I also like to start with a good confession just to have a positive note to start on. And we definitely need it now. So is there something good you want to confess?
I mean, I guess you kind of covered it, which is that I made a show on Quibby. It's a humble brag though, because, a lot of people are shitting on Quibby. And so it's been this weird time where I'm really proud of the show I made. It was really, the most fulfilling, amazing, creative experience of my life. And it was my show and so great. And then it comes out and now there's all these people shitting on the platform. So that's been kind of a bummer, but I'm embracing it and learning. And also, it's the most champagne problem of the entire universe. So I made a Quibby. I'm a proud Quibby creator. And, I was telling you before we got started, I'm from the Valley originally. And I've always rejected my roots of being from the Valley. I was being a Valley girl, it has all these kind of negative connotations. And I just wanted to be from somewhere else in LA. And then now I'm back in the Valley, embracing my roots. And I feel it's the same thing with Quibby where people are going to hate, but it's who I am. I made a fucking Quibby, y'all. I made a Quibby.
I will say, you should be proud of making a show no matter what. And I think most people making fun of Quibby I've never heard anybody making fun of the content because it is just so, as a comedian, fun to just it's a low-hanging fruit. But I think most of it is just the pull quotes that Jeffrey Katzenberg has said in media. Some of them are fun to make fun of, but not the content.
I totally get it. And, it's all...
Some of it's framing, too. I think there was a article that they pulled a quote where he said, "I blame everything on the pandemic." Everything. And it's okay, that he didn't.
I think that was a misquote or something. I have to say, my experience personally with Jeffrey Katzenberg has been pretty amazing. He, to his credit, from the beginning, read these insane scripts and understood and got what I was going for, and was so supportive and cool, and really let me have complete creative control, which is, very, very rare. And so I really as much as he's, getting shit on Twitter or whatever right now, but I love the man because he let me make the show I wanted to make and made it a reality and believed in me. And it was pretty goddamn cool.
Yeah. And it's really fun show. So for people who haven't watched it yet, definitely go watch it. But it's, let me see, I'm sure you're a better way of explaining, but because I love robots, I'm going to try my best to explain this. It's
Okay, but she's not a robot. But
she's not a robot, but she is a sex doll.
Yeah.
But I talk a lot about robots that are in the general sphere of AI and sex bots and all that. So for my listeners, she's not a robot in our world sense, but she's a robot in my sense of being able to program empathy using technology, which is the feminine view of technology, which I feel like men talking about the singularity always leave out. So I really like that your show takes in that into account. So she's the main character, Cody, finds her boyfriend's sex doll and becomes friends with her. And at first it's like this shocking discovery because it's like, oh no, she's like this doll version of me, but she's like, plastic and perfect and a sex doll, literally. But then they become friends and have this very beautiful friendship and learn a lot about each other. So it's very fun.
You nailed it. That's right.
Well, can I ask though, because I'm guessing the robot thing comes up. Is that a point of contention? And is there in your mind, what is the difference to make that differentiation?
Well, I just remember when I first wrote the pilot, which was now like 4 maybe more years ago, it was just around the time where like robot sex dolls were starting to get introduced like on the market. And I was like, fuck, I really want to make this show before sex dolls are a real thing that are like commonplace, because the whole point of the show wouldn't work if the doll is a robot, then anyone can hear her talk. But what's so special about this show is their relationship is that Cody, the character named after me, played by Anna Kendrick, is the only one who can hear Barbara, the sex doll. So everyone else just sees this inanimate sex doll made out of plastic, but Cody can hear her. And which I think, to your point earlier, like men, it's so easy for men to objectify, but women automatically humanize. So like this whole thing was based on my real life. When I first started dating my now fiance, almost 5 years ago, it came out that he had a sex doll. We were being like super open and honest about all of our kinks and fetishes and all this stuff. And it came out that he had a sex doll. And I was just like, I'm sexually evolved and a liberated woman. I'm a feminist. I don't care. Like, it's just like porn. Who cares? Like, I'm open to all that. It doesn't matter. And then like the longer we were together and the more time I was spending at his house, I found myself like thinking about her all the time and being like, what closet is she in? And like, where is she? And just becoming obsessed with this idea of her and humanizing her. Whereas Dan, to him, it was just this object that he was like, do you want me to get rid of it? It's not a big deal at all. Like, I got this before I have a foot fetish. I mostly use it for the feet. My dog chewed up my mannequin leg, so I got this instead. Like, to him, it was not a big deal. And to me, I was like, no, don't get rid of it. Because to me, that felt like me, like a personal failure. Like, I could not like deal with this jealousy of this inanimate object, that I couldn't help but humanize her and think about her that way. And then it all kind of came together when I was writing a new thing, and I was just like, I'm going to write about this just for fun, because it was clearly tormenting me. and then it became a pilot script.
Well, it's becoming so much more and more relevant, because I mean, you kind of challenge this idea of like, well, we talk about like, what's the difference between porn and then when it's live, but then some men will say, well, like, that didn't mean anything. But obviously where we are now in the present, we'll still draw those lines in traditional relationships, if it's like a person, even if they claim it doesn't mean anything. But we're now getting to a point where our phones have our bots in a way, and can substitute for these kinds of interactions. And sometimes on the other end of that, there is a person, but is that really who they are? They might just be sharing this piece of them. They might be programming, or it might literally be programmed by a team of, so it kind of gets into these questions through a very, eloquent story. So, I mean, I think about this a lot. So I think this was like when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I got to watch this. So I love that you take it very personal, but then it inspires all these other questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I also saw that you had written about psychics as well. And I wanted to ask about that, because I think the idea of Cody sort of talking to Barbara, to me, I almost like, I like to look sometimes from this like psychological lens, where it's the best way to ruin comedy, but she kind of projects herself onto the doll, and it's this way of kind of dealing, like looking at yourself, but using an object to kind of examine your own insecurities without feeling like it's so personal. And I often think with psychics and mediums and tarot and that sort of thing, which I love, I often think that's also another way of projecting your inner thoughts onto something that feels outside of yourself. So I'm curious if through your work, that's like a theme that comes up a lot, or have you ever made that connection?
Well, I'll say a couple things. Number one, I think you're totally right on. Like, to me, Barbara, the sex doll, sort of represents or does represent the inner voice that every woman, every person, but specifically women, I think, have that inner voice in their head, that inner critic that tells them they're not pretty enough, they're not smart enough, they're not funny enough. As a writer, it's even more intense. I feel for me of like, you know, every time I try to write, it's just this inner critic being like, that's a shitty, you're a terrible writer, that's awful. So Barbara sort of became the id to Cody's ego, and they're kind of one in the same, they're part of the same person. And the story really, you know, is about kind of like learning to love that inner voice and learning to accept it and learning to be friends with yourself. And something that my therapist always says to me when I'm going through a hard time is like, would you talk that way to young Cody? Would you say that kind of stuff to your like younger self? And I'm like, no, of course not. And she's like, so why are you saying it to yourself? And so, you know, Barbara represents all the harsh inner critic, rude, terrible things that every woman I think says to herself throughout the day all the time. But throughout their journey, they sort of bond and learn to love each other and become friends. And it's sort of about befriending your own inner self. And but as for psychics and tarot and all that shit, I am very much into. I'm like, it's weird. Like, if you asked me a couple years ago, I might be like, no, not really. I don't buy it. Like when I wrote Deadbeat, I definitely was more like, it's, you know, satirical, making fun of this, like the medium, the main medium is real, but like there's a fake psychic woman who's like just doing a whole scam. But interestingly, my grandmother, who's now since passed on, but my mom's mom was this amazing woman, Alice. And she, in her later years, got really into astrology. Okay. And she would do like she was very social and everyone loved her. And she would do everyone's charts. And so I remember like, whenever I would get like a new boyfriend, I would call her and be like, Grandma Alice, like he was born on this day. And what do you like, can you do our charts and see if we're going to work out? And then this is sort of like a fabled thing that I still to this day don't know if it's really true, but I like to believe that it's true.
I can't wait. I love that.
My mom, I have a sister who's 8 years older than me. So my mom had to have a cesarean section with her. So when she got pregnant with me, she knew she would have to have the same thing. So I guess how they do it is they give you like a 2-week time frame to make an appointment and you come in and get your baby out. And so the legend has it in my family that my grandma Alice chose my birthday. Wow. So anytime I have like any good luck, I'm always like, Grandma Alice, Grandma Alice. But I will tell you this funny thing that happened recently. A friend of mine, I think everyone has been, you know, probably all feeling the same way during quarantine of just like soul searching and then everything with BLM. Just we're all doing a lot of like self-reflection and just like figuring shit out and all of that. But I was like, you know, my friend said that she had this Zoom psychic reading and it was amazing. And like, she talked to her dead grandmother and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I want to do that. That sounds so fun. So I did it. Wow. And I was totally expecting Grandma Alice to show up because she's obviously like into all that shit. And like, I expected her to show up and for us to like have a whole thing. So when the psychic reading starts, he starts saying stuff. And I'm like, this doesn't sound like Grandma Alice. And he's like, you know, I'm seeing a cop car and he's describing this stuff. And I'm like, oh, Grandpa Harry? And it's like my grandpa that like I was not very close with and kind of didn't really like that much. And it was Grandpa Harry was there. And so I kept trying to sort of
was
like,
he a cop? Like, or what was the cop car?
He was a cop. Yes.
Wow.
He was a New York cop back in the, you know, 40s, whenever. He was my dad's father. And so Grandpa Harry is like appearing in this psychic thing. And I'm sort of like trying to like pivot and be like, okay, it was really great to talk to you, Grandpa. Like, is Grandma Alice around? Like, is there anyone else from the family that wants to like say anything right now? And the
how do you hang
like,
up on a ghost?
and the psychic is like, no, Grandpa Harry's still here. Like, he really needs to talk about something. And then I sort of let loose and I was like, look, Grandpa, it's like, I love you, man. But like, I didn't know you that well. I heard that like, you kind of, you know, were a little abusive maybe to my dad. I know that was like back in the day, that was like normal and whatever, but like, and then the psychic like stops and he's like, oh my God, okay, hold on a second. And he's like, this actually never happened to me before, but the spirit, he's crying. He's very upset. He's very upset. And I was like, oh no, Grandpa, no. I'm sure everyone beat people with belts back then. That was like normal. Like, we love you. Like, everything's fine. And like, literally the only way to get Grandpa Harry to stop crying was for me to say, look, Grandpa, I love you. And if I wind up having a kid, I'll name him or her after you.
Wow.
And now I'm like, if
that's
I have
a big
kid,
commitment.
it better be. I think Harry Heller for a girl is like a pretty badass name. So now I'm like,
that's a
right.
cool girl's name. That's so funny. My little brother's name was Harry, and I don't meet a lot of Harrys. Yeah. So
I love it. I love that name.
Yeah.
Well, I was always confused because like with my grandpa, I always like, I'm from California, so I say Harry, but like my New York cousins, they say like Harry, like they pronounce it slightly differently.
we're a little
like
British
Harry.
almost, like, right?
Yeah, so I'm
it's
like,
like
well,
Harry
if I have
Potter.
a kid named, is it just Harry or is it like Harry?
It's
How do you
also,
say it?
I think I say Harry, but I also think a
Harry.
lot of the older or more senior Harrys, it's short for something. So
like Harold.
Like
Yeah.
Harold or Harrison. But yeah, we just
Yes.
named my brother straight up Harry, which I always thought was kind of funny. But
I love that. No, if I have a kid, it's going to be Harry Heller. It has to be now because I made this pact with Grandpa Harry.
that is a great name for a girl, yeah. I love that story. Okay, well, I feel like we have already gotten into the confessions, but Cody, is there something you want to tell me, or should we keep talking about this? I mean, there's so much I can go off of this.
I have some confessions. One of them is like, I think I would get arrested for, so I'm not gonna say it. And it's like,
Okay.
I really do want to say it, but I'm worried about getting arrested.
Okay, maybe for your next Quibby, you can
this is-
fictionalize that.
This is one that I'm like, it's not like I've never told anyone, but it's not something that I've like shared widely, which is that when I was a kid, I had a habit of like faking a lot of injuries. Like, so I one time wanted a cast really bad. Like,
Okay.
I for some reason really wanted like glasses and braces and casts. Like, I guess it was just a desperate need for attention, but like I wanted these things that like most people would be like, I don't want braces, but I'd be like, oh my God, are you kidding? Like, I want a headgear. I'm gonna like, I fucking want a neck gear all day long. Give it to me.
Were you were the youngest, or I know you, so you said you had an older sister. Okay.
So yes, probably some of it was a function of like seeing my older sister Sloane have like her retainer and think that that's like a cool teenage thing and be like, I want that. But I basically had a series of like several different incidents where like one time I was playing handball at school and I just completely lied and said that like the ball hit my wrist in a weird way. And I like said it really hurt. And I went to the nurse's office. My parents were called. We went to the hospital. To this day, I don't know how I got away with this, but like they did an x-ray and everything. Nothing was wrong. I was not injured in any way, but I just kept complaining that I was hurt until they gave me a cast. And I wound up having this cast. First, it was just like a cast that went up to the elbow. And I remember like being so stoked about it. It was purple and it smelled really good.
You can get signatures. That was like a cool thing. I remember that.
Having a cast is cool. And I had like all my friends sign it. And then I remember that first night I went to sleep and like the next morning I woke up and the sheets were all covered in marker because it wasn't, they hadn't signed it in permanent marker. It was just like that, whatever that like Mr. Smelly marker. But so then that fake broken wrist turned into like, I think for about a year I had a cast. Like after I got the elbow one taken off, I was like, it still really hurts. And so then they gave me one of those permabend ones that starts at the shoulder and goes all the way down. And I had that for a while. And like, I don't know why I wanted this. I still don't know to this day. And then I faked like I
want to talk a little bit about the cat. I mean, I feel like there's so much, but this is well. First of all, my first thought, because you wrote a show about a sex doll and then you were literally covering yourself in cast, I just thought that's a funny image. You're almost turning yourself into a mannequin from. But
what's what interesting like side fact? You know the movie Mannequin from the 80s?
I haven't seen it, but I'm more.
Whatever. It's whatever. Kim Cattrall's in it. It's pretty like fun to watch nowadays. But my writing instructor in college, I majored in directing, but I took a few writing courses and my writing instructor wrote Mannequin.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't even put it together until like I was making Dummy and I was like, oh my God, Mannequin. And my amazing sound woman on Dummy, Mary Jo Devaney, who's like the most amazing woman in the world, who's been around forever and is just the coolest chick ever. She was the sound person on Mannequin.
Oh,
It was
wow.
like this crazy, yeah. Anyway, but yes, you make a good point. I want to be plastic. I wanted to be plastic even back then. I still do.
Well, there's something about, so I'm curious too, in terms of, I mean, you kind of in that moment got what you wanted, which was the attention and also being believed, right? Because that's part of it too, which honestly, even when I do have real pain going to a doctor as a woman, most of the time it's like, you might not be believed. So you sort of right off the bat were believed and got the affection you were looking for. So I could see how addicting that would be to continue doing that.
But I do think like years later, I feel like I finally like told my parents, like,
yeah, what was that like? Did they know?
And I think they were like, yeah, we knew. We just were going through the divorce and we wanted to throw you a bone and, you know, whatever. Like they kind of knew. But I did the same thing with braces where like I complained that my teeth hurt to the point where I was way too young to have braces. I didn't have my grown-up teeth in yet. I still had baby teeth.
Oh, wow.
But I put up such a fuss that they pulled out my 4 front baby teeth, waited for the adult teeth to grow in to give me braces. So by the time I was done with braces, all my friends were just starting to get braces because I like did it so early. And I think that was a function of like wanting to be like my sister who was a teenager and like had braces.
That I feel like the braces thing, I definitely remember being a thing because a lot of the cool girls had them and the rubber bands.
I remember I would do like, I was more about the retainer. I knew that the braces were like a necessary step to the retainer, but I remember I used to put like chewed gum on the roof of my mouth and then I would take a paper clip and straighten it out and put it in front to make it look like I was wearing a retainer. So I thought it was so badass.
That's so funny. By the time I got a retainer, they had transitioned into the Invisalign. So I never had one of those. But I do remember seeing that.
Remember the ones that were like straight across?
That's so funny. I mean, okay, so you dropped the bomb about the divorce, which I feel like we can't ignore had something to do with you wanting attention at the time.
For sure.
I mean, is that a connection you drew before, or were you just making that in the moment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I knew that was part of it was like around the same time as the divorce was when I started like seeking out these physical ailments to get attention.
Had you seen sort of like, I feel like definitely the trope of someone, you know, getting hurt and getting a lot of attention in a cast is, we all have had that friend in elementary school who did something dumb and then all of a sudden got all the flowers. But do you remember if there was like a moment or a friend or a neighbor or someone like that where you're like, oh, that's a way to get, or did it just kind of pop up out of nowhere?
Honestly, I don't think at the time I was aware of it being a thing about attention. It was really more about like the accessorizing. Like I thought a cast looked cool. I thought braces looked cool. Like it was about, and like I wanted glasses. I wanted like all these things to make me feel, and it goes back to your robot thing. Like I guess I was uncomfortable with my own skin, trying to find ways to modify myself, and I give myself an identity in a way where it's like, oh, the girl with the cast. Like it's something that kind of gives you this automatic identity, and maybe that's what I was searching for.
That's so interesting. I have an identical twin sister, and we've always sort of grown. I mean, growing up, we were always trying to differentiate ourselves. But I would, even though I'm older, I would often try to. She was the one who would like want to do things like braces, and then I wouldn't want it till she got it, and I would get it because if she was getting braces, I would get it. But what you said reminded me of. Sorry,
can I just interrupt? Is she who's older and by how many seconds or minutes or whatever?
I'm older by 2 minutes, and she's a musician, so we're both creative, but she doesn't do comedy. Okay. But she when she got chicken pox, I remember feeling, I mean, it's different than the cast, but I remember being jealous that I didn't have chicken pox. And we had read books about it in school, and it was one of those things, the books are supposed to make you feel better about getting it, but then if you read the books first, you almost glorify the experience.
Wait, and you didn't get it even though you were like in the same house and being together?
So I had heart surgery as a baby and she didn't. So I think my parents said they think because I got blood donated as a kid that I had immunity.
You got the antibodies.
Yeah. So I never got it. I mean, they were literally like, well, you might as well get it. So they didn't, quarantine me from her, but I didn't get it. And I remember lying and saying I was itchy because I also wanted the oatmeal bath. And I'm sure they would have just been like, sure, you can still have it. But instead of just saying I want the oatmeal bath and attention, I was like, I'm also itchy. I think I'm getting chickenpox. And it never fully, I never actually got it. So
I can't imagine having a twin is such a fascinating, like, are you guys close now? What's your relation? Does she live in LA? What's your deal?
Yeah, so we are close. We are actually living together. I mean, and we don't have to get into this at all. So the log line of this is we are currently, because of quarantine, a lot of past trauma came up. So right now she's moved out but we're on like good terms in terms of like both wanting to work it out. But we're that close where we are now 30 years old and we're like, I think we still act like children around each other. So we should probably figure that out. But
wow.
I know quarantine brings up a lot, I think. Are you and your sister close?
We are. She lives in Kansas City, so it sucks because she's far away, but we talk all the time. We're super close. She's married and she has two kids, and I have a niece and a nephew that I am so into, especially the niece who's like reminds me of me. She like loves eating and it's just like the little things where I'm like, oh my God, she's so me. And I definitely now I'm like, I maybe want kids. I don't know. I like still don't know. I know I have to now to name one of them Harry for my grandfather or else his soul will be damned for all eternity. But being around my niece and nephew, like especially me and my now fiance, we when we're around them, there's like moments where we're like, oh my God, we obviously have to have kids. Like, look how fun this is. And then there's moments where we're like, never in a million years. This is awful. I need to sleep right now. This is a fucking nightmare. But yeah, my sister and I are super close. I love her. It's such a bummer right now being far away from her. I'm looking into like maybe renting like a camper and just me and Dan and the 3 dogs, like just driving out there and spending like a month there or something. Cause we're, all working over Zoom anyway. And I miss them.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, hopefully I didn't make you too sad bringing that up.
No,
but,
no.
Yeah, okay, so what other injuries? So we talked about the cast, and you sounded like you had like a whole slew that came up after that.
I was into horseback riding as a kid for a while. It started off as like, my name is Cody, so it was like more of a Western thing. Like I embraced being like, like a Western kind of girl. But then I like got seriously into horseback riding for a tiny bit and like took lessons and was into it. And one time I fell off the horse. It was not a bad fall at all. Like totally got up and was fine, but pretended that my knee really hurt and got crutches. I really wanted crutches.
Wow,
so bad.
That's
I wanted
so
crutches.
extreme.
I thought crutches were so cool.
Did you ever actually try to get hurt, or was it always like reactionary, like in the moment?
Well, the day before, when I really wanted braces, I knew I had like a dental cleaning appointment coming up. So for the days coming up to that, I remember sucking my thumb a lot because I heard that sucking your thumb leads to like your teeth being crooked and needing braces. But I didn't naturally suck my thumb as a kid. But here I was at like, however old I was, like 8 years old, like sucking my thumb a ton, thinking that in the next couple of days that's going to do anything. But yeah, it was the braces, the crutches, the arm casts.
Wow.
Oh, and then when I got the braces, I also got a headgear / neck gear that was only supposed to be worn at night, but I wore it during the day to school too, because I liked being made fun of. I liked when people would make fun of me. Like, wow. I liked people. I liked feeling like an underdog, I guess. Like people would be like making fun of me and I'd be like, I don't care. Like I look cool in it. Like, I don't know what I was a fucking weird kid, as probably every single kid is. But yeah, I think that was the extent of all of my faked injuries.
I don't think it's that. Well, it's one manifestation of a relatable thought, because I don't think it's that weird where it came from, but I guess it is an extreme version of kids wanting to control their environment and be able to. I mean, it works.
I mean, it's Munchausen's, right? Like not by proxy, but just regular Munchausen's. Like I just wanted the attention. Yeah.
And in a way, it wasn't like, I mean, I'm sure now we've evolved in the mental health sphere to be able to talk about like emotional, pain and needs, but it wasn't that you weren't suffering. It seems like as a child without the resources to talk about your, emotions, you probably were feeling something and you didn't know how to say like, I'm sad or I'm this. So it's easier to be like, well, I fell, and they'll know what to do if I say my wrist hurts.
Yeah.
And I'll get a cast and I'll feel like it's getting better. And it's almost like this like externalizing your internal feelings where, I mean, obviously all children go through emotions. So it's not that it doesn't sound to me, even though I just met you, that you were just like a psychopath trying to fake injuries. It sounded like you were maybe needing something and that was the way you helped yourself get it.
Yes. I think that's an accurate assessment. I also wrote down another secret.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so whatever, this is kind of dumb, but I just was like, oh, this is something that I remember from my childhood that like, I wonder if I'm the only person who had this really specific thing or if a lot of other people had it, or probably not. But, I find that I obviously, from my show Dummy, I talk very openly about sex stuff. I think it's really important. I think our culture is so full of shame when it comes to sex that like it causes so many more problems than necessary. If we just like, I mean, if you go on Pornhub, the top like category is incest, but like no one will admit and be like, yeah, I watched that. They're like embarrassed. It's like, no, that's so shameful. But it's like, no, it's a taboo fantasy. It doesn't mean you actually want to fuck your family. It's whatever. So, but the point is like, I like to explore sexuality in all of its fullness. And so I think back a lot to like when I was a kid, and, I feel like in media, there's always jokes about like boys jerking off and like, oh, you got a teenage boy, that means the sheet is going to be hard as a rock, covered in cum. Like, you know what I mean? Just like all these jokes, but you don't really, I mean, except for Booksmart, which I thought was so brilliant and amazing. And the way that they did that, I was like, that is amazing. And I wish that was around when I was a teenager. But like female masturbation isn't as dealt with as commonly as male masturbation. And I find that like when I'm talking to my girlfriends and referring back to my past experiences, like girls masturbate a lot, like a lot as kids, probably more than boys, and like at a younger age too. And I remember like I have tons of memories of like discovering my body at a very young age. And so it made me think that before, like I had a very specific masturbation technique as a young kid that I'm like, how did I think of it? I have no idea. I just remember it very clearly that I would keep a pen next to my bed, just like a regular pen with a cap on it. And this is like really graphic, but this is what the show is about, right? Doesn't matter. I can say this.
No, yeah, we've talked about. It's very open. There's no.
Okay.
No.
So I would take the pen and I would just like gently like tap the cap of the pen against my clit over and over again. And I'm like, oh my God, I basically invented a vibrator as a kid. Like this was my makeshift. This was like my way of, and I'm
that's very like, yeah, that's a very engineering move to do. I mean, as a child, yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, my parents had a jacuzzi, like we had like a bath that had jets in it. And I remember very early discovering that situation and being like, I'm going to park myself here for the next 2 hours and I'm good. And like, I was all about that. But the pen technique was something that like, I hadn't really thought of. I feel like
that's more advanced than even college boys. Like, I feel like it took men till like 25 to even figure out where the clit was. So
yes, exactly. So yeah, that's my other secret. Very interested if any of the fans of the pod ever dabbled in the pen technique. Very curious to hear, or if it was simply something of my own creation. I recommend trying it. You just literally dab, you just, kind of tap the end of a closed pen against your clit over and over again until you come.
And, a lot of if the pen's out of ink, it's a good way to recycle the pen. So
exactly.
It's actually very good for the environment.
It's actually about the environment more than anything. That's what it really is.
I think it's very clever. I don't think I knew the word masturbation till I was maybe I knew for men, but I just, for some reason, it's weird now to be like, I thought only men did it. Like the definition was so linked to like the act of jerking off a penis that I didn't even consider like oh, it just means like pleasuring yourself.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that was a thing for women, which is pretty wild. Because I also like similar, with my stuffed animals and whatever. But like it wasn't something I would label. And then
you wouldn't know what that was. You just did it, but it wasn't like a thing. Yeah.
I like something you were saying earlier reminded me of a scene in Dummy, because there's a scene where Cody's in the car with Barbara, and they're talking about having or she's saying you're not a feminist. She says, because I hear you do like daddy fantasies. She's like, it doesn't mean I actually want to fuck my dad, but it was, I mean, it's a very funny scene. And because then she goes, I don't want to fuck my dad, but it's kind of puts out into the world this idea. It's like, when people have these fantasies, we obviously know that's not real, but you also don't even want to get to the point where you ask yourself that, so you almost stay away.
You put these things in your head, you put these own judgments in your head immediately, which causes you to be like scared of these things, when in reality it's like, no, there's such a difference between a fantasy world of taboo and like this. And I think that, something that's like super controversial is like age play and like the idea of like daddy-daughter age play. And it's like, I personally don't have a problem with it, because I believe that there is a firm and like very distinct line drawn between fantasy and reality. And like those are completely different things. And I know that's like a controversial topic, and I've read up on that and been like, that's really interesting. I think that I feel like this is like making like a really intense political statement that I'm probably shouldn't be making, but like, I feel like pedophilia would be way less of like a fucking insane, crazy issue if people would be open with their like consensual adult partners and say like, hey, I have this fantasy about whatever, can we role play this? But it's like, because that is so scary for people to be able to say like, oh, I have this sexual fantasy, which has nothing to do with reality. I don't want to actually fuck a kid. There's just something about this particular idea that turns me on in this moment. I don't know. I just think it's all fascinating to like take apart and be like, where are we going wrong with like how much shame has affected sexuality, especially here in the States?
Well, I think that's really well said. I want to add on to that, because this is maybe more a recent realization, but I think so much of the shame and like lies and emotional abuse and all this stuff that happens in the world is not because someone's inherently bad, but it's because someone's ignoring the truth. So I think if someone had a fantasy like that, just because they don't say it doesn't mean they don't have it, right? So without any judgment on like whether it's good or bad or whatever, where it comes from, if it is the truth, just ignoring it doesn't make it go away.
Exactly.
So I think to address it as a reality,
I totally agree. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And like for me, especially with writing Dummy, it was like these things were eating away at me, these insecurities. And I found that like I really was able to free myself of so much shame by being like, putting it out there. All the things that I was insecure about, just putting it out there on the page and being like, I feel like I'm a bad writer. I feel like I'm not hot enough. I feel like Dan Sexall is better than me. I feel like he loves her more than me. Like all these things that were going through my head that were so shameful and private and like just within my own head, kind of just, walking around and pacing through the day. And I was like, I got to do something about this. And as soon as it became this thing that I was like, no, I can share this publicly and talk about it. And some people will relate, some people won't, but that in itself was very freeing and like just healing in a way too.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. But what did you learn anything as because sometimes when you're writing yourself as a character, I know it's not actually you, but it's inspired from you, you can look at it almost like another person. Did you learn anything from making your character grow that informed, your real life instead of the other? I mean, I know often we'll write about what we have learned, but were there reverse sort of moments like that?
I mean, it was weird because when I first wrote like the original pilot, I was so early on in dating Dan. It was like within the first 6 months to a year of us dating. So really the power dynamic of him being this very successful, and for people who don't know, Dan Harmon, he created Community and co-creator of Rick and Morty. He's like a very prolific TV writer, producer that like someone like me looked up to and was like, oh my God, to one day be anything like him would be so amazing. And then I was dating him. So very like, insecure about that. But I think the very act of like writing this thing sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. Going back to like, I wrote this thing very early on in the relationship when our dynamic was very different. But weirdly enough, me creating this thing and then actually making it and being the showrunner and doing it is the thing that made us equals now in a way. I mean, he's still obviously so much more prolific than me, but like, it's the thing that made me trust myself as a writer and as a creative on my own and not see him as this like God on a pedestal that I'm like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to be with you. And more just like, oh, we both are writers. We write very different stuff, but like whatever. But it was the act of like going through the process of making this thing that I think in a way, not cured, but like helped to bring our relationship to the next level and eliminate some of that like toxicity that I was probably harboring beforehand because of that fear of not being good enough or wanting him to approve or validate me. And now it's like, now I never, you know, in the early on, I would like go to him with drafts and be like, what do you think about this? Do you have any notes? And now I'm like, I would never do that because first of all, we write different things and I don't want his advice. Like, even though he has tons of great advice all the time, it's like, no, I need to trust my own voice on this. And also I'm just like, that our relationship is a totally separate thing and it thrives the best when work is kept out of it. And like, we just evolved and now it's, you know, we've been together almost 5 years. I proposed to him in December of 2018. He's going to take my last name, which
That's
I think
awesome.
is something that, you know, to me, I've never been like a person who cared that much about like getting married or having kids. And now I'm like, maybe I will have kids because of the Harry Heller thing, whatever. But I was never really sure. And
Right,
like,
a
I've
ghost
never been
made you. I mean, you could just say this
A
is the
ghost-
verdict of my grandpa. You have to take my last name.
I know. But I never, like, having a wedding was never something that was like a thing in my life. It was never like I dreamt of my wedding day or dress or whatever. But when like in early 2018, one of my best friends got married and her husband took her last name, and it just got me thinking of like, it was in the middle, you know, it was like all the Me Too stuff was happening. We're going through this reckoning. And I was just like, yeah, this is like the most basic fucking shit. Like the patriarchy literally will not be dismantled until we can at the very least stop being literally absorbed by men when we marry them and taking their last name. So I was like thinking about it, joking about it. It was just occupying my mind. And I kind of joked with Dan and I was like, if we ever got married, like, would you take my last name? And he was like, yeah, but you'd have to like, you know, put a ring on it, obviously. And I was like, yeah, of course I would. So like one night I go on like kaysjewelers.com. I'm like wasted and at a bar with my friend, the one who like her husband took her last name. And I like bought a ring. I based it. Dan was previously married for a bit.
You found his Pinterest board and then you hacked it.
I had his assistant find his old wedding ring and I got it sized. And I ordered a ring on Kay's Jewelers that said Dan Heller on it. And we went to Tahiti for a trip and I didn't tell anyone I was going to do it. I was like, I'll see how I feel when I get there. Like, if I'm annoyed with him, I'm not going to propose. Like, I don't want to be on anyone's like time schedule or like have anyone expecting anything. And then we were in Tahiti, we were having a great time. And I like took him underwater. We were staying in this like amazing bungalow thing. I took him under. And I have it all on video and I like proposed and we're getting married as soon as there's a vaccine.
That's so sweet and so thoughtful. And when you were saying all that, I know this is sort of just a joke, but it almost feels like in the beginning when you were saying you're looking for him for validation and you had all these insecurities, and then through the show you found, you know, you could trust yourself. It's almost like he was the sex doll too, because he was who you projected the insecurities. And, you know, I mean, it's sort of this extension of all these things you wanted to be, but you were. I mean, you are a writer. You are all these things. And he's just further.
And interestingly, I think, you know, the way the show turned out, which brings me delight, is that like the character of Dan is the least important character of the show. It's really just about Cody and Barbara / Cody and herself. But like, that was really important to me too, was just keeping it. And you know, when I first wrote it, I kept our real names in because it was just intended to be this sort of sample script. And I was like, as someone who had hired writers in the past, I know how often you get a, you know, stack of scripts on your desk and they all sort of bleed into one another and they're all sort of the same. And I was like, if you have a script that says Dan Harmon's name, like there's a chance that you might be like, oh, this is weird and fucking interesting. I'll read it. So I kept our names in. And then, you know, years later when it wound up getting made, I was going to change the names. And then Anna Kendrick was the one who was like, no, we should leave the names. It's so cool. And I was like, okay, I guess so. Yeah. And we left the names in. And then that was a total just like hilarious trip in and of itself, just because we'd be like on set and Anna is playing me, and the wardrobe designer, who's incredible, Beth Morgan, she really like took in what my aesthetic was. And like Anna would show up on set one day and we'd be wearing like the same, we'd be like at Video Village, she'd come out of her trailer and I'd be like, we're wearing the same exact fucking outfit.
That's so funny.
That was fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because this is the first time I'm meeting you on Zoom, but I've watched the show, and then, you know, obviously Anna plays you in the show, but right away I was like, oh, yep, yeah, I can see that.
You can kind of see it.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it. We got small foreheads, thin lips, thin upper lips. We were like, in our first meeting, we were like, what are the things that we're insecure, that we're both like share insecurities about, that we can like make fun of? Because that's my whole thing. And, you know, she's obviously very, very slim. But when I first wrote it, I wrote it with all these kind of fat jokes, because the sex doll is obviously going to have this perfect body. And, you know, I originally kind of thought I was going to play myself. And I was like, you know, I got big pendulous breasts and like, it's a very different look than a sex doll. But when I met with Anna, we had this conversation where it was like, yeah, literally every single woman, even like the most perfect, skinny, whatever idealized, like whatever version of what we think is supposed to be the best body, even those women look at themselves in the mirror and have fucking issues. So like we decided to keep the fat jokes in, and it made it funnier to me that to have this sex doll who's like making fun of Anna, who's so clearly so skinny, but like having these fat jokes in just made me laugh all the more.
I feel like that's the nuance, yeah, when it's created by, like, it's authentic. Like, you make that joke, it doesn't feel like fat shaming, but if this was all written and directed by men, it would be questionable of, like, are you perpetuating a stereotype which you are part of creating? Right. But it's also, like, talking about shining the sunlight on truth. We shouldn't just ignore the fact that people have these insecurities. So I think that's why it's so important to let women tell these stories that are honest and personal, because it does feel different. It doesn't feel like a guy making an easy punchline of calling a woman fat, because it's actually in her head.
And what was really cool was, you know, Quibby and Whip, who was the studio, they were so supportive. And like from the beginning, I was like, look, I really want to hire as many women department heads and women in general on this crew as possible. Like I've worked on so many sets where like there's so many fucking dudes, and that's fine. But like, I want to try to do things differently for this. It's a female centric show. It deals with a lot of like intimate, personal things. I want the women to all feel comfortable. I don't want it to be a weird environment. So we really went and found all these incredible women, and it was a, you know, predominantly female department head and crew and cast, the whole thing. But now it's really interesting, because now I'm like, after the revolution and BLM and all that, I'm like, yeah, they were pretty much all white. I fucked up, you know, like all these things, and I'm learning and I'm growing. And but it's like I'm so grateful for the chance to be able to have the privilege to be like, okay, yeah, I tried to do this good thing, I did part of a good thing, but like there's so much more work to be done. And now if I'm lucky enough to have another opportunity to show run and be the leader of a show, that will be a priority. It's not just about women, it's about making sure that it's marginalized people, it's everyone taking up space and everyone being a part of it, because that's the future. And I'm hopeful, and I'm feeling like that's where everyone, at least all the people that I like, are in that headspace right now. So it feels like a strange time because of quarantine, and we don't know when productions are going to start up, but also a hopeful time in terms of like, this is the time for a revolution and a change, and to finally do something about this stuff that has just been rotting away at our culture for way too long.
Well, thank you for saying that. I feel like that's really, I mean, I want to recognize that that's really hard to say, because it's like, yeah, you're also dealing with a struggle of your own. So even saying something like that is so honest. And I feel like it's really hard to do, you know, like just to, you know, call that out. And
here's another here's another secret that's like shameful, really truly shameful, but I will admit it. So in the show, it's semi autobiographical. There's not that many characters. It's me, Dan, the doll, and then like there's not that many other characters. But one of the other characters is my therapist, which is loosely based on my real life therapist. And my real life therapist is not Black. She's a white Jewish woman. But in the show, I was like, well, I don't want it to be all white people. I want some diversity. So this seems like a perfect role to cast a Black woman or a person of color, because it's one of the only other roles available in the show. It's such a small show. So we found this amazing woman. She's an incredible actress, but this woman who's Black played the role of the therapist. And as soon as before the show came out, I was on Twitter and I saw this article that was about like how this is a trend, that there's a trope of Black women playing therapists on TV shows. And it's like the new like mammy. It's like they don't have their own agency. They don't have their own stories. They're literally there to service the stories of the white protagonists. And I was like, holy fucking shit. I completely, without intending to, did this. Did not mean to at all. Like truly was just coming from a place of like, I want to cast a diverse person for this role because there are so few roles. But in doing so, fell for this thing of like, now I'm like, no, that was not my intention at all. But like, it's true. So all of this is just like making me do so much self-reflection and thinking and wanting to be better and wanting to do better and wanting to be part of a better world.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important like thing to look at yourself, but also look at the big picture, right? Because that trope, I mean, I am aware of that trope, but I think it also speaks to a bigger issue of there's not as many works being created by people of color, which in this situation, it's your show and it's you. So you did what you could in this version. But on a bigger level for the whole industry, then they should also be giving, a Black woman the show to write. And then in her story, she would be the main character. And then so that's sort of what happens when it gets bottlenecked. But it is hard to look at a piece without looking at the whole. So sometimes we just want to say, well, since I didn't do this whole thing, and you didn't, you obviously didn't walk in and say, this is how I want everything to be. But I think that's what I love about technology. And I think you're ahead of your time talking about the sex doll and it's incorporating therapy and all this, because I think we're going to see a lot more of these kinds of shows and in drama too. But it's a step towards, this is where I get really like, you can tell I love bots, where it's a step towards the right direction. The technology first has to exist, and then we figure out how to use it. Like, full disclosure, my original like dive into bots was like a few years ago. I had written a pilot about, very different from yours, but it was about a sex bot turned therapist. And it's basically was to try to say like men created robots and they're scared of the singularity because they don't like when something they create has autonomy, which is how they treat women in life. Because when we all started talking, they're like, well, you didn't like the thing that I did to you for decades. So I feel like the technology is not bad. It's just forcing us to look at ourselves. And you did it really well because she literally learns about herself through this friendship. So I think it's an incredible show. And I think you take an angle on technology, and I know it's not bots, but on sex dolls that I haven't seen in a lot of the male-driven shows. So I really love that.
Thank you. That means so much to me. It truly makes me really happy.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess the final thing before we go, just for fun, if you, outside of this world, if you were to create a bot based on you now, it doesn't have to be a sex doll, just like a mannequin doll, what would be the defining character? Or characteristic? I feel like characteristic trait is the proper word.
Like, is she humanoid looking, or it can literally be anything?
I guess she can be anything. I guess this is like if we're sitting in Mattel, like pitching the Cody doll. What is the Cody doll's trait? I
think she is able to like handle all of her various like weed, alcohol, all of her various vices. She's able to handle in a way where you're like, oh my God, she's always like perfectly buzzed to the point where she's be socially like fun, but not belligerent and fucked up. Like she can always maintain that perfect level of fucked upness that's like enjoyable to be around.
That sounds like a great superpower. Just perfect amount of fun and just, I mean, I can't do that. So I feel like I would buy that doll. Thank you so much, Cody. Is there anything, I mean, obviously everyone should go check out Dummy, which is out on Quibby. Do you want to tell the listeners where your socials or anything else you want to plug?
Oh, sure. You can check out my my Instagram. My handle is Normal Heller, like normal, like a normal person. Normal Heller, Heller. And there is a highlight in there that I do think is worth mentioning. Part of when I started shooting Dummy, I had this like joke. Whenever I work on any show, I kind of like come up with like a jokey show within a show that I'll like, you know, just lots of fun shenanigans come out of it. But I had this joke that I was like trying to get Anna Kendrick to follow me on Instagram. And so I would shoot these little like in between scenes. I'd be like, here, let me get this shot. To this day, Anna still has not followed me on Instagram, even though we're like legitimately friends. Like we went on a vacation together before quarantine. Like we are friends, but she still has not followed me. But I have a highlight. I think it's called Trying to Get Anna Kendrick to Follow Me on Instagram, or just Anna Kendrick. But it's worth watching. You can see some behind the scenes of what it was like being on the Dummy set. And yeah, watch Dummy. And, you know, for anyone who's like really hating on Quibby in a big way and has a problem with paying for the subscription, like hit me up over DM. Be honest. Don't be like a piece of shit, because there's bigger causes to donate to right now. But I will pay for a month's subscription to anyone who like genuinely wants to check out Dummy but does not have the means to pay for an extra thing right now, because I realize we're in a pandemic and there are a million streaming services and everyone has their things going on. But I do really want people to check out the show, and I hope people like it. And if they don't, that's cool too. Don't be too mean on Twitter or Instagram about it. I feel like, you know, people are so mean, not about this specifically, but I've just noticed this, you know, I being on social media as a person, I'm just, it's so bizarre to me and upsetting that people are such assholes.
They
Like,
need to they need to have a conversation with their own dolls so they can get all their aggression out and figure out.
Like why, just get a cast on your arm and you'll get the attention you need. Like you're gonna be fine, baby. Like it's fine. You don't need to be mean on Twitter or Instagram. Just like get some braces, get a neck beard.
Yeah, that's a great way to respond to trolls. Get some braces. Thank you so much, Cody. You can follow
Teresa.
Oh, sorry.
No, thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it was so nice. You guys can follow this podcast at Tell Me Anything Pod and follow me at Larissa T on Twitter and Instagram. And check out Dummy.